next august panel. We have an equally strong group to talk about the role of production in tomorrow's marketplace. And Dr. Scott Fausti from the College of Business from good old CSUMB will be putting this group through the paces. He has a background in livestock economics, and he joined the faculty at Cal State Monterey Bay just a couple years ago after hanging out at South Dakota University since 1991. So
1991.
That's right. So in the wonderful world of ag, he has a great working knowledge of the broadacre ag, livestock, and now he gets to hang out in the Central Coast and expand his repertoire. And we're lucky to have him, and his forte is ag economics. And he will be joined by really a very talented and terrific group to talk about production. And so let's see if they're, it is Colby Pereira, I thought.
It is.
I couldn't see, but I was guessing. And she's a manager at Costa Farms. She's currently the president of the Monterey County Farm Bureau, is a board member of the Grower Shipper Association, and has very involved with the Central Coast Young Farmers and Ranchers. And she's involved in all facets of production, food safety, land use and water. When you are hanging out with those boards and you're the chair of the Farm Bureau, you're on numerous committees, and she's certainly very, very qualified to talk about production on a go-forward basis. And then this is the order I've got it in the program. So I'm going, we've got this reversed. The thorn is between the two roses. So I'm going to finish with Jason. I've got Dr. Hillary Thomas next, and she heads up the research department at Nature Right Berry Growers, where she focuses on development of applied agricultural research and technology transfers to growers. And she received her doctorate in entomology in 2009 from UC Davis, and she went on to serve as a science and technology fellow in the California State Legislature. And she's been very involved with the California Strawberry Commission, and she is well known for her integrated pest management work on the lygus bug and other pests. And she is currently a fruit and vegetable class of 2019 and 40 under 40 honoree. So, Doctor, welcome. And then last, Jason Smith, who is the CEO with Smith Family Wines. He's a second-generation grape grower, and he is, I think you are still the reigning chair of the Grower Shipper Association. So good to have you here. And Jason is, he has a reputation. He is known for his team building talents, collaborative style, and all of his friends here who are in the room can vouch for his good character and his personal generosity.
It's good you found those talents,
yes,
not the others.
Yeah. No, I was going to make sure you were in good shape when I finished up. Both Jason and Smith Family Wines are well known for their generosity to friends, employees, and the community. So with that, Scott, you've got a great group to explore the future of production.
Thank you, Dennis. Good afternoon, and as Dennis indicated, my name is Scott Fausti, and I'm on the faculty of the College of Business at CSUMB. And first, an announcement: I've been asked to remind the audience to fill out the question cards, and when you have a card with a question on it, please raise it up in the air so our students will be able to collect those cards and pass them up, so I'll be able to ask your questions. Now, I'm really excited about being the moderator for this panel because this panel is on production. And of course, as Dennis indicated, I spent 25 years at South Dakota State University, right? And, I'm a boots on the ground type of guy, even though, I haven't had the opportunity like I did back in South Dakota to spend time out on the farm and the ranch. But of course, we have an exciting panel here, of course, Colby, Jason, and Hillary, and we're going to be exploring production issues. And so without further ado, let's begin, and I'll start with Colby. And Colby, tell us a bit about what made you decide to enter into a career in agriculture, and a little bit about your background, please. And then I'll ask the same question of Jason and Hillary as we move along.
Sure, sounds good. So my introduction into agriculture actually came at the time of my birth. I work for my family. I'm a third generation member of our family's farming operation. So I really knew at a young age that coming back and working for the family was exactly what I wanted to do. So a lot of decisions I made along the way were with that ultimate goal in mind. Was very lucky that from a very early age, I was able to go out and work on the ranches alongside my grandfather, my uncles, my mom. Got to really see and learn at a young age, and that only bolstered my opinion that that's what I wanted to do. Went down to college at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, took classes knowing that I wanted to come back for the family, did a double major in ag business and crop science because I wanted to make sure and cover the business side of the operation, but I also really wanted to have that knowledge needed for production, you know, a lot of the plant science, crop science elements. Again, upon graduation, came back, worked for the family, and the rest is history.
Colby, in the area of production, can you give me a little bit of insight what made you decide to specialize in production in your career?
Sure, great question. So I graduated college in 2005 and kind of came back not knowing exactly what I was going to do other than there were some roles that needed to be filled within the company. Well, as you may recall, in 2006 is when we had the spinach E. coli outbreak. So food safety really became a hot topic, and at that time there wasn't really anybody in the company that was managing that specifically, so that kind of just naturally fell onto my plate. Food safety encompasses all sorts of the production chains, so it just really naturally went that direction for me.
Thank you. Jason?
So I'll follow with the theme of second-generation family farms, but I'm going to be opposite of Colby. I went to school to not come back and farm and be in agriculture, and not. That was actually, you know, my dad started grape growing here in 1973, and I will just sidebar to that and let you all know he was working at a lab in San Jose, had never grown anything but maybe the lawn, and had the opportunity to come down here when grape growing was really getting into its heyday in the early to mid 70s, and became a grape grower. So had no background, you know, was a ag economics, managerial economics degree from Davis, but no production, ag or whatever. So that's my short deal as we're talking to students. You can do whatever the hell you want. One. Two, I didn't want to come back here and do ag, I didn't think. And after 5 years of school at Davis, I had a degree in organizational studies and a minor in human development, and no better idea of what the hell I was going to do. I came back to the family business and production. But I would say with that, as you asked Colby the same production question, mine, and you can tell with my background, has been more about the people and the communication, and that'll be a theme of things that I go over there.
Thank you, Jason. Hillary?
Okay, so is this working? Can you hear me? Yep. All right, there we go.
Perfect.
So I came from a slightly different background. I'm first generation, born in San Francisco, and I completed my PhD in 2009 in entomology. Actually, Dean Lawson, I worked for him as a grad student, taking leaf samples for him once upon a time. For those of you who are younger, the financial crisis in 2008 affected academia as well. And I had also learned a little bit earlier than that some of the skills that I have in the entomology academic world wasn't a perfect fit for me, and so I was exploring options, and I had the great opportunity to go through the California Council of Science and Technology program into the Capitol building as a science advisor for, at the time, Speaker Pro Tem Fiona Ma, who's now the Treasurer of California. And so through that process, learned a lot and opened my eyes to all of the different options and applications of my technical and other skill sets, but ultimately also learned that growers were bearing the brunt of the burden, that regulatory challenges were going to continue to come down the pipeline. So when the California Strawberry Commission called me, it was a natural progression for me to move down here and to start helping the growers anticipate what those regulatory challenges were. And then at some point, I wanted my own program, so I've moved to the private side, and so I've been building this department for about 4 years. And we deal largely with all of the challenges that any grower would have, regulatory, but labor is also a huge issue in the berry industry.
Excellent, thank you. And we'll begin now with Hillary, since you brought up the issue of regulation. Can you talk to us a bit about some of the challenges people in managing production for agriculture in the valley face due to the regulations that growers have to comply with?
Ooh, that's a broad question. And I think this is the right lineup for this because berries have very different challenges than grapes and produce. So I think on the berry side, most of our regulatory challenges are around labor. Obviously, we do have all of the traditional issues, water, et cetera. But I think, labor's going to be our major issue, and how to remain profitable, and this is your area of expertise,
Yes.
and an operating budget while dealing with the rising cost of that and lack of availability. Yeah. And also, we are coming upon a time where we're going to lose a lot of tools in the toolbox in California. We've already lost our fumigants.
Right.
Come July of next year, we won't have neonicotinoids as well. And so for me as an IPM specialist, looking at how do we put together an integrated pest management program that works, we have less and less tools available at our fingertips.
Thank you. Jason?
Regulation. The governor just passed over 1,000 bills that he signed in. And some of those affect ag directly. I guess what I'd say is, for us in the production farming community, we feel like it's illegal to farm. That's kind of how it's set up, and we're constantly. It doesn't matter if any product that we use in the chemical world has gone through ridiculous scrutiny to ever be approved by our federal government in the first place. The things we do with water conservation and to be able to continue there, the things we're doing with our labor force, a common theme is how do we do more with less is really what I think regulation means to all of us. And especially in California, right? We live in, one of the most beautiful places in the world, and it also costs more than anywhere else in the world, and it's a royal pain in the butt because all of our voters and all the people that are putting through these bills to regulate or whatever are in the urban areas. I mean, food comes from a store, right? They don't have any idea where it comes from, that it actually comes out of it. That's a generalization, obviously. But so that's a huge fight. It's why, I've done Farm Bureau and on the Grower Shipper Association, these are, and there's statewide and nationwide organizations that we're really fighting to be able to keep the tools, and a lot what we talk about too is how we proactively tell our story, so that when something happens like a spinach outbreak or whatever, we're not reeling backwards trying to tell you all the wonderful things we've done when no one cares if someone's died from an outbreak of something or other or whatever. So how we get those positive stories out there.
Thank you, Jason. Colby?
So my counterparts here on stage already made some really great points about tools needed in the toolbox. I think you can look at regulatory actions both internally and externally. They mentioned some really good ones related to internal production, tools in the toolbox, labor reform and immigration issues, different chemical and pest protection elements, food safety protocols. Just closing the loop a little bit on the internal, I think what we see a lot in terms of regulation on the farm is a lot of duplication of efforts. You really have a lot of different entities, agencies, and organizations wanting to accomplish the same thing out at the farm level. So we're going through different audits or inspections or needing to do a lot of duplication on our end to satisfy a lot of different regulatory bodies, whether that's local, state, federal, etc. It's burdensome on the farmers, and like Jason mentioned, there's still a big piece of education that needs to happen at that level. A lot of the elected officials that are in charge of making these regulatory enforcements aren't really familiar with what we're doing on the farm. So something that we try and do is have people come out and visit so we can really show and educate and demonstrate that as a farmer, as a producer, we're trying to do the best that we know how with our tools in the toolbox and how they can be helpful to us instead of just putting extra burdens in place. On the external side, we also have to think a lot about regulatory things that are happening out in our communities, right? Housing. There's a lot of restrictions and regulatory things in place that are keeping us from building more housing and having enough housing on the Central Coast specifically to accommodate our workforce. So even though it's not happening on the farm, that has direct impact to our production. It's harder to attract qualified workers for people who are working in production agriculture to find affordable places to live. So streamlining processes would be really helpful even externally. Larger scale, we can talk all day about, pest protection registration. We definitely need some movement on the immigration and labor front. And food safety as well. As farmers, we're still trying to use the best science that we have available to us to make smart decisions out at the field. And that all really takes a collaborative effort instead of a lot of different agencies kind of wanting pieces of the pie. We all need to kind of work together to streamline the regulatory environment.
I would just add in to that we're talking about ag and our industry. This is really about also a lot of the stuff we're talking about. California business in general, housing problems are for everybody, and a lot of these issues are for everybody. There's a lot of other regulated things that go on. So I don't want to sit up here with three of us and act like, oh, it's ag and we're just getting regulated. It's just the world that we live in, especially here in California.
Very interesting points that all three of you brought up. And of course, highlighting the challenges that production agriculture faces. How do you see technology and science moving us to finding solutions to some of the issues that you have raised? Why don't we start with Colby?
Sure. So I think there is a huge need for science and technology development. We're already seeing a lot of it. I mean, this is the epicenter of where technology and research is stemming from across all areas of the industry and a lot of fields. We have really bright minds in this neck of the woods. Now, are there still things that are always going to require a human touch and an actual body to do them? Absolutely. But the fact that we're looking into those things, we have the Western Growers Center for Tech and Innovation, which is fantastic, really bright minds. But you also have a grower community here with Production Ag that is willing to take these folks out to the field and sit down one-on-one and hear some of these ideas and really talk about what makes sense. Are we going to be able to implement that technology? Let's go out to the field and find out how to make it work. Does it need to be scaled differently? What are some of the challenges? So this is really where that is happening here on the Central Coast. We should be very proud of that. In terms of the science aspect, we always need to understand more of what we're doing. I'll use food safety just as an example. After the spinach outbreak of which I mentioned, the California Leafy Green Marketing Agreement, of which you might have heard, it's LGMA, was formed. And that was kind of an industry food safety product that everybody was going to follow best practices and grow safe food. Well, that document completely changes as we have more science available to us. We use different universities, different research communities, and as science tells us something different about our current production methods, the industry comes together to adopt those new standards to make sure we're keeping up with the changing science. So to your point, it's absolutely critical that we continue exploring those resources.
Jason?
So I'll go, specifically into, the grape industry, mechanization in general, which we've actually followed a lot of what Australia's done because they don't have a lot of labor in Australia, so they've been some of the leaders in wine grape mechanization. But we are starting to do things that we never used to do in the vineyards mechanically, and part of it is, some of it was a pushback from the actual wineries that didn't want it, but as regulation and costs go up, our margins get smaller and smaller, and we have to find more efficient ways. And on top of that is just actually having the labor to get it done. So I'd say that's one side, and then another part is, you know, over the years and whatever, is more productive use of the land. You know, when we originally planted vineyards here in the 70s, we planted what was a state-of-the-art vineyard in California, which was 600 vines to the acre. What we didn't account for was the climate in the San Joaquin Valley is much different than the climate in Monterey County, and so there is the same, we had a lot less production doing the same thing. So what's happened is in the 70s we planted everything and it was 600 vines to the acre. Today we are 1,200 to 1,800 to 2,000 vines per acre in order to, and there's different trellises and lots of different things. So that same acre of grapes, and this is up and down the state, but specifically here, is producing more than what it was, you know, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. So those are two spots.
Hillary?
The same. So I'm going to piggyback on the mechanization part of that. 10 years ago, when I came into the industry, you know, we were working mainly on how to farm without fumigants or how to put together pest management programs, and we still cover that in my department, but that's really low-hanging fruit compared to most of my time now is spent with engineers and with startups. And, you know, that's a very muddy landscape where you have startups fishing, technologies fishing for an application, but when you're a grower shipper, you have very specific objectives and goals, and you're really kind of sorting through all of that to figure out who's going to actually deliver and provide and not just sell their company out to a start, you know, for the money side. So, you know, the holy grail for the berry industry, we have a lot of robotics guys who are actively working on harvesting fruit, but that's going to be a long ways out. And so in our operating budgets, we're really looking for what are these transitional technologies that are going to help us do cost savings in the meantime so that we can get there. And so that could be anything as simple as I'm rolling out drones to release beneficial mites, because it's not an entomology issue, it's a labor issue. I can save all of that crew and have cost savings as well. So I think that's where I see it. And then as well on the breeding side, as we move into new production systems, and especially for my crop, the breeding cycle is a very long cycle to get a new variety using traditional techniques. So things like CRISPR, things like better phenotyping are going to move us forward. And then we're going to need all the data managers. So I'm really excited that you guys are rolling out the mechatronics program, but somebody's going to have to process and interpret all of this data that we're going to have at the farm level.
Yes. And of course, as I indicated, I'm from the Midwest. Right? And of course, precision agriculture has played an important role in increasing production productivity. And I was wondering, as experts in production, what type of precision agriculture technology are you using in your operations?
I'll start. So a piece of equipment that we're really proud of is we worked a couple years ago on developing an automated thinning machine. We worked with a vision robotics company to work on the computer eye, and we used some of our farm equipment. And now we're doing some of our thinning operations. Instead of having a crew of 20 people going through a field, we can essentially take our automated thinner machine through with one driver and accomplish the same task. It's really cool, the technology that's involved. The eye can identify what's keeper plants and what a weed or a non-keeper plant is, and you can set the settings on spacing and different programmatic settings, and it's getting done. Sometimes you'll have to come through and do just a little bit of a cleanup, with a weeding crew afterwards, but we were really proud to work on that. And a lot of our seeding machines too, trying to get more precise with our seeding to hopefully one day eliminate the need to have to even come out and thin. If we can just get our spacing so precise on direct seeding, it could potentially eliminate that step of having to thin.
Yes, variable rate technology plays an important role in the Midwest with respect to the issue of seeding and fertilizer applications. Jason? Can you follow up on the precision agriculture question?
Yeah, precision ag, I guess a combination of precision and more efficient. So for the way you get vines denser is by planting them closer together. And so our rows used to be 12 feet apart, and now a lot of them are 6 feet apart. And what that changed for us is that we started farming over the vine rather than in between the rows. So the mechanical grape harvester has always been an over-the-row machine that's been around for a long time, and really that technology hasn't changed. What's changed is developing basically a tractor that's over the row that then can start as a pre-pruner in the winter and quick disconnect and put in a spray rig for the spring and summer, and quick disconnect and put in a harvester. So all of a sudden you have more utility there. As far as the precision deal, you know, we're in upright rows, and literally these you know, these over-the-row machines can be set up with wands that are calculated off of the row spacing, and keep your speed, keep yourself leveled at a certain deal. It will also then calibrate your sprays. It can do a whole bunch of stuff. I think in a lot of what's happening now, this stuff has been going on for years, but maybe it was a little bit slower. What's happening now is it's an actual necessity. Like, we need to figure this stuff out, or we are not going to be in business, because we won't have the people to do it, or the margins just continue to get smaller and smaller in order to do that. So those are some examples.
I want to do one follow-up question for Jason. Of course, what I've always been fascinated with in the vineyard industry here in California is the use of drip irrigation, and because of the issue with sustainability with respect to our shortage of water. And now, do you also incorporate moisture measuring instruments with your drip irrigation, moisture sensors?
Yeah, so there's all kinds. There's older school in soil, and there's some newer stuff where we're actually taking live samples out of the leaf, or later in the season actually even out of the berry, showing how much water's going through and what you need and whatever. We were early adopters into drip irrigation because it worked. I will say, a funny part of, things that you don't think about. Funny part of the drought, when, the recent one that we went through, or any time that we have a drought, it isn't actually here in Monterey County as much that we don't have the water, because we are pretty lucky that we live in a pretty good place. We have water issues, but supply isn't the biggest one. But what's interesting in drip irrigation is that you're just dripping in one spot, and you kind of have this little ball of water, which is great. But the problem is we count on winter rains to flush the soil. So we don't have any way to flush the soil. So all of a sudden, a year or two of drought, and we're trying to figure out why our plants look like they're dying. Well, they're just sitting in a salt bath. And so these are things as you go along, and then what the heck do you do, right? How do you combat that? We'd see a small storm coming in, we'd pre-irrigate for 24 hours in hopes that a quarter inch might actually move something through the soil. Didn't work real well, but as we talk about innovations and whatever, there was a product that came out 4 or 5 years ago that helped the actual pH that you could add to your drip and do that. So more examples of science and technology helping us move things along in something as drip irrigation that was innovative in its time, but anytime you innovate anything, I think there's other problems that come up that you don't foresee or know. You know, you heard it earlier as you're doing product development. You're like, oh, that's a great idea, until it's not.
Hillary, would you?
I'll
add-
piggyback on the salt issue because
Okay.
I think in our industry, we are playing with substrate production. And so you look to the model in Europe for how they dealt with the loss of materials or available tools. And they're all growing in substrate instead of soil. And it's something we don't see in the strawberry side of this industry here in California, but we are starting to see for other caneberry crops, raspberries, blackberries, where we're growing in potted production. And that opens up a world of precision ag, because I have a lot of data at my fingertips, but I also have lower pest pressure in those systems. And so I have higher yields, and I don't have these salt buildups, and I can recirculate and I can reuse. And so there's some of those costs with nutrition, even though there's some salt management still in those systems, can be recouped, right? Now, whether with the cost of land in California, that's going to continue to remain here, that's the question, because you move into those systems and we could be growing closer to market outlet, right? If you can get under the right controlled environment system, you could be closer to the East Coast, so.
Thank you very much. The cards are starting to come in, but I wanted to have each of you provide our students in the audience some advice with respect to careers in, production agriculture. Where do you see, the need for college-trained, people in science and in business and economics for in the future? Colby, start.
Sure. So I would say, when it comes to production ag, the possibilities are really endless because we have to think of production ag as being larger than just field level operations anymore. There is certainly the growing and the harvesting element that is your classic production agriculture, but like we heard, there's a research and science need to continue exploring those things. We need marketing people to help sell the crops that we're taking off our field. A lot of sales and marketing jobs are great. We also need, in the transportation world, how are we getting our products from our farms or from the coolers to the consumers? We need ag educators. Like I mentioned earlier, we really have a task in front of us to do more education on how we're growing and producing out at the field level, and making that bond with the consumers. Instead of just thinking that that head of lettuce is just magically appearing on your grocery store, how did it get there and what hands touched it at all of these stages to get it there? And with that, side note, comes a larger appreciation of what's happening out on the farms. So I think the possibilities are endless, and our last panel said it really great in terms of you really just need to try your hand at different things, explore and find what's gonna speak to your heart and what you have passion for, because the ag industry, it's a difficult industry. It's a lot of work. So you really have to make sure that you're loving what you're doing every day and looking forward to going to work when you get up. So we heard it again last, but internships are always great. Part-time jobs, just exploring what options are out there is a great place to start. And then once you find something that kind of gets that spark, continue down that path.
Thank you. Jason?
So, other than actually being in the dirt, figure out whatever it is that you want to do, and you can probably do it in ag. Lawyer, accountant, marketing, to build on what you say, health and wellness. We have a wellness program in our company, and our employee engagement is a huge piece. My sister does that for us, and she's out in gym clothes every day and seeing the people in our company. So really, any place that you want to go can be ag. You hear ag, and it's like, oh, I gotta put on my jeans and boots and go get a shovel and do it. That's actually a lot of times the easiest part. It's everything else, and there's a huge need. What I will tell you, when I try to see audiences like this, whether they're high school, college, or otherwise, is if you're going to hone anything, hone your communication skills, because it does not matter how great and what degree and whatever it is you do. If you can't speak and communicate. And I will say this one even more important than anything else: listen. So I mean, and this has been a eye opener for me probably in the last 5 or 6 years. As you can tell, I don't have a problem talking. Listening is a skill. And to be able to, a lot of what we deal with in our everyday lives is negotiation and even negotiation and differing views, right? We turn on the news, we can see differing views. The ability to actually listen, it doesn't mean you have to agree, but you have to understand what the other person is trying to say to be successful. And if you want to be married, you should probably figure that out as well.
All right.
How about that?
I'm going to piggyback
All right,
on on the soft skills. So yeah, I mean, as a piled high and deep, I'd say, yeah, go for what you like technically, but we can train the technical side, but it really takes time and focus to get the soft skill side dialed in. And so, yeah, when we're moving towards these more data-driven production systems, you're going to have more people, advisors that have different areas of expertise. You may end up being one of those. But if you can't communicate well to decision makers and to the rest of the team, it's moot point. And so that's what I really look for, and the staff that I hire are people who can work at the farm level and can also do the data stuff.
And I would say, I mean, I'm part of a CEO group, and we meet once a month. Our number one problem every month is finding good people. And I think good people for us are work ethic, willing to fail, willing to take chances, and really, there is no easy way. There is no easy button. There is no simple anything. And, if you can sit up here and you looked at the last panel with a couple of generational farmers and Colby and I are, that sure the hell doesn't make it any easier anyways. So just adds a whole other layer of issues.
And if I may just add one more thing, don't be scared or deterred from coming in and doing something basic and entry level. A lot of people hold out for that perfect dream job. Start at the bottom, because you're going to learn how to do all the tasks and skills and continue to grow the ladder. And a good manager eventually that's managing a team needs to be able to not only tell folks how to do, but to show and demonstrate and teach too. So it's really critical to not pass up any good opportunities, because really it's going to help you develop professionally and become a better manager over time.
I want to pile on that as well. That is why I'm able to do what I'm able to do, because I started out pulling weeds and working in the shop and driving tractor. And, when I got out of school, I wasn't just the snotty-nosed dad's son who was coming in there. I was the kid who actually went out and did all those things. And it just gives you, besides some respect within your company, and it doesn't matter if you're family or not, but also you understand what it really is, what it is to get stuck in a cubicle and doing a data dive into whatever, or walking, acres and acres of vineyards to look at pest pressure and what's going on out there. So there's no better way to learn than by doing.
Thank you. Hillary, did you have a comment?
Well, I was just going to comment that if you feel you need support in that, we're in the perfect environment. And so CSUMB is very, I'm sure there are resources here, especially on the soft skill development side, but also, how many of you attended Digital Nest Flight last week? Any of the students in the room? It was a yes? Then you're wearing your shirt. Good job. So that was an event that over 50%, it was a career event, over 50% of the attendees were from CSUMB. So you have resources. The point is you have free resources in your community that should be easy for you to access to hone those skills.
Yes, and before I go to the question, I got one more question to ask. Of course, the theme of this year's forum is tomorrow's marketplace. And of course, what is your hope or prediction, right, for how production for your particular segment of the industry is going to change? What's going to be the big change that's going to happen to allow you to be prosperous and more efficient and more competitive, in the future?
grapes are going to be the base of White Claw. No? But I mean, it's funny, and and I listened earlier to the panel talking about products out there, and how you're in a store and you don't get in it, you just don't have time to be looking to go find it. We live in a world of, you got an aisle or two full of wine labels, and God, our industry is awful. We're intimidating to the consumer, and how am I going to choose, and blah, blah, blah. So to answer your question, I don't know. I mean, specifically for me, I believe that we need to be more approachable. We need to get out of being ostentatious, which those will be the biggest syllable words I use for the week. Syllable word. But it's intimidating. We need to make it friendly, right? White Claw and those type of products. I mean, have you guys seen the Truly ads? The Truly ads are awesome. They take, I'm having a romantic night with my wife, and the guy takes a wine bottle, pours out the wine, puts a candle in it, and pulls out a Truly. I mean, this is the kind of stuff, and we get into marketing. I mean, that is a huge piece. We heard it earlier as well, talking about, we don't have the budgets to talk about the health benefits of vegetables and berries and wine, which actually, part of Truly and White Claw's success is that it's 100 calories and 5% alcohol. So, I mean, these are real realities of what's coming forward, and there is a generational change specifically in our industry, where baby boomers have been the biggest consumer, and they're drinking less as they get older, and you guys, as newer wine drinkers, right? You get 50 different choices of water, much less wine and beer and spirits and all that stuff. So how we get attention to that, I'm not totally sure. And we're in a global market. So, I mean, I got a lot of questions. This is the crap that keeps me up at night. So, drink more wine.
Thank you. Hillary?
I don't know what White Claw is. But we'll talk about it afterwards. I think there's a couple things I'd like for the berry industry moving forward. So we've been very married to field pack, and I think as some of the technologies for mechanization are implemented, what it might help us move away from, which once upon a time was a game changer, the clamshell, right? But these ways to market and package differently as mechanization happens, I'm really excited about that. And then, we've bred for productivity, we've bred for shippability. I would love to see us enter a phase where taste is, and that's where we're going with our breeding in all realms in the public and the private sectors. We need to go back to the consumer and to taste. So.
And yeah, I'll piggyback just a little bit off of what Hillary said. It's the same on the veg side. We're really working to identify products that meet different taste profiles and texture profiles at the marketplace now. People love their conventional vegetables, but we're also seeing such a rise, and people want the funky cool stuff too, and what crunches on your burger better than some of our historic breeds. So as a farmer, our goal is to be providing the safest, healthiest, fresh produce and encouraging our consumers to eat it and to feed to families, but also running a business too. We talked about sustainability a little bit. We're being asked to produce with less and less resources and inputs, and our margins aren't growing at all. I mean, what a head of lettuce sells for in the grocery store is pretty much the same as what it did 10 years ago. So those returns aren't being felt at the field level, and everybody always forgets one of the most critical parts of sustainability, which is business sustainability. Our company employs thousands of people. It's a job sustainability issue too, and that goes with the entire ag industry, not for just production, but all the affiliated companies. You have so many vendors, trucking, fuel, manufacturers of products, whether it's irrigation products, fertilizer products, that depend on the sustainability of our industry. So at the end of the day, we just want to be growing products that are appealing to the consumer, hoping that those are consumed, because on the health side, we have a true health epidemic in which we all need to be consuming more fruits and vegetables and wine with your salad.
You wash it down, yeah.
That's right.
And I've been told that we have 5 minutes, so I'm going to ask this question from one of our students in the audience. and they're asking for advice on what to study in college. It goes, what college courses and majors provided good background for your jobs?
So I think I will speak just from my own experience. I mean, you definitely have to have your business skills, some basic economics, business accounting, communication skills like what Jason and Hillary mentioned are absolutely critical. And then get your base science courses as well. If you have a good foundation, training can take care of the rest. If you have a positive attitude, you're willing to learn, and you're genuinely interested in what you're doing on a daily basis, a good management team and a good company can teach you the rest of it, and the experience will come with it.
So I'd dovetail into that is don't try to do something that you really aren't good at in school, right? I mean, there's a reason why I was in organizational studies, business sociology side, because I'm not a science and a math guy. But that's fine. It doesn't mean, there's a spot for you. So I guess that, as I said earlier, there's a place for you in ag wherever you want to go. But ask yourself what you believe you're good at. Some people aren't good at communicating. Then good. Like, dig into the science and math, and we'll go into a lab and do some important things that, by the way, you're still going to have to communicate with people. But, so that's my 2 cents.
Hillary?
Yeah, so if I was going straight technology side and for you to make money, I'd tell you to be a plant breeder. But to Jason's point, I don't like being down in the weeds. I'm not a plant breeder, right? So that on that side, I say, they like royalties and they make a lot of money, and I wish I'd known about that earlier. But again, if you can't communicate, if you can't get the trust and the buy-in, if you are leaning towards the STEM side, and you can't get the trust and buy-in of the business guys or the marketing people or anybody else, then it's all moot point, I think. So you got to be able to, the utmost respect I give is to my crews, because they know the most about what's happening at the field level, and that's who I want to help the most, right? And they'll know what the problems are. So yeah, just really exposing yourself, and in ag in particular, there's so many layers of just knowing the business and exposing yourself to those different aspects of it. Yeah.
And I would talk to your professors, talk to your TAs. We talked about the opportunities of the place where you live in your backyard. I have one kid out of college and one kid in it, and the one that's currently in it, I keep kicking him in the rear end, and I'm like, hey, Mr. Communicator, go stop talking to every girl at the bar and go talk to your teachers, and go talk to, because that's where it's really at, is developing relationships and understanding. And guess what? For all of us who've been doing it for most of our life, we're actually happy to sit down with people like you who are interested and want to ask questions. It's why we're here today, and we volunteered to do this.
Thank you, Jason. And I would like to give Jason, Colby, and Hillary a round of applause for an excellent panel. Thank all three of you very much.